A massive military buildup is underway right now, and China is, well, not happy. Japan is rapidly constructing what some are now calling a missile archipelago, a network of fortified islands armed with long-range strike capabilities aimed at deterring Beijing. Today we'll break down what Japan is building, why it matters, and how China is reacting. Last month on this show, we told you about Japan's decision to deploy a surface-to-air missile system to Yonaguni. That's the tiny Japanese island just 68 miles from Taiwan's coast. At the time, Tokyo described it as a defensive upgrade, one battery, one island, meant to help detect and intercept hostile aircraft or drones. Well, based on new reporting, it turns out that deployment was only the opening act. Japan isn't simply fortifying one island near Taiwan. It is carrying out the largest, most comprehensive military buildup since World War II, a transformation so big that some inside Japan are now calling it a missile archipelago. And the scale of what's happening is definitely significant. Across the entire 160-island Ryukyu chain, that's a long arc of islands that runs from Japan's main islands all the way down toward Taiwan, Japan is building new missile batteries, radar stations, ammunition depots, electronic warfare units, and hardened infrastructure designed specifically to counter China. They're already under construction and in some places already operational. This buildup has roots going back several years. In 2022, after then-House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, China fired missiles that landed near Yonaguni. That incident jolted Japanese planners and convinced Tokyo that the old assumptions about distance and safety no longer applied. But the recent remarks from Japan's new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, accelerated everything. When she said a Chinese blockade of Taiwan could trigger a, quote, survival-threatening situation requiring Japanese intervention, Beijing erupted, and Japan then doubled down on its preparations. Now we're seeing what that looks like on the ground. Yonaguni itself has already changed dramatically. New housing blocks for troops, an electronic warfare division moving in, anti-air missile units on the way, and more islands are next. Step by step, Tokyo is turning its southern archipelago into a defensive wall designed to counter China. But the most striking development may actually be happening a bit farther north, on an uninhabited island called Magashima. Magashima, located in the narrow Osumi Strait, is one of the few waterways the Chinese naval vessels use to break out into the wider Pacific. And Japan has purchased the entire island for $146 million. That seems like a bargain. To build a massive new joint training base for U.S. and Japanese F-35 fighter jets. Satellite imagery reviewed this week shows the pace of construction, a 2,000-meter runway, ammunition depots, fuel farms, and a pier large enough to serve warships. 6,000 workers are now on the island. That's 1,000 more than last year. It's rapidly becoming one of the most important air power hubs in the Western Pacific. For the U.S., which has been shifting toward more distributed operations in anticipation of a conflict with China, Magashima solves a major problem: where to conduct carrier-style takeoff and landing training without flying hundreds of miles from mainland Japan. And for Japan, the base symbolizes a huge strategic shift, integrating its own F-35s with U.S. operations and hardening its southwest flank. China knows exactly what this means. As we reported yesterday, state media and propaganda outlets for China have begun broadcasting lengthy reports accusing Japan of abandoning its pacifist identity and, quote, reviving militarism. Beijing's diplomats are reaching back to World War II-era declarations to challenge Japan's territorial rights. And Chinese military experts are warning that the new F-35 hub could serve not only as a training site, but as a forward operating base in a conflict. Inside Japan, the public debate echoes the anxiety. Some residents on the islands worry that their homeland could become a battleground. Others argue that China's pressure leaves Japan with no alternative. And Japanese defense officials are being clear. These deployments are about deterrence, making the region too costly for China to dominate. Which brings us back to the bigger picture. Japan's military posture is changing. rapidly, visibly, and permanently. Yonaguni was the first sign, but Magashima and the broader fortification of the entire Ryukyu chain show a country preparing for the possibility of a Taiwan crisis that spills into its own territory. And Tokyo is no longer shy about saying so. If a conflict breaks out in the Taiwan Strait, Japan could be pulled in almost immediately, not by choice, but by geography and alliance commitments. And Beijing is reacting, well, like a government that understands the strategic map of East Asia is shifting under its feet. All right, coming up next, South Korea scrambles jets after a joint Chinese-Russian fly-through of its air defense zone. And new reports say Israeli operatives monitored U.S. and allied officials at a joint base in Israel tied to Gaza planning. I'll be right back. Hey, Mike Baker here. Now, we've all seen those scary ads about owing money to the IRS. You know the ones I'm talking about, the ads that try to frighten you into calling. Well, let me tell you about a different kind of business. They're called tax relief advocates. And if you owe the IRS, whether it's $5,000 or $50,000 or $500,000, TRA, Tax Relief Advocates, has solutions to help resolve your tax problems. The good news is that you can get help anytime by visiting TRA.com, and TRA could reduce or even eliminate what you owe. Their team is passionate about helping individuals and businesses fix IRS issues, and they have over 1,000 five-star reviews on Google and an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau. Look, you no longer need to be afraid of the IRS. Generous programs are available to give you a fresh start. End your tax troubles today by visiting TRA.com. Again, that's TRA.com. Tax Relief Advocates, real solutions for real people. Welcome back to the PDB. Tension is rising on the Korean peninsula after Seoul scrambled fighter jets yesterday when Russian and Chinese aircraft entered its air defense zone. Moscow and Beijing insist it's nothing unusual, absolutely nothing to see here. Just a military exercise. But with the two increasingly in sync, these drills are getting harder to ignore. It's becoming a regular dance. Russia and China execute military exercises in the Korea Air Self-Defense Identification Zone, and you say, does that have an acronym? Well, of course it does, and it would be KADIZ, K-A-D-I-Z, the Korea Air Self-Defense Identification Zone. Seoul sends its pilots into the air, and Moscow and Beijing's defense ministries insist that the situation is entirely under control. According to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, 7 Russian and 2 Chinese aircraft entered and exited the zone yesterday morning, prompting South Korea to shadow them for about an hour until the drills concluded, quote, in any case of contingencies, end quote. An earlier report from South Korean media suggested as many as 11 aircraft had entered the zone, though South Korean officials later confirmed that figure was lower. It's important to note that the KADIZ is not South Korea's territorial airspace. It's a broader early warning buffer zone that foreign aircraft can legally enter. However, when Russian and Chinese military aircraft repeatedly push into that zone, Seoul then questions whether they're simply exercising rights or testing the country's defense response. Still within hours of the exercise's conclusion, China's defense ministry rolled out the familiar language about, quote, annual cooperation plans and the 10th Joint Strategic Air Patrol, as if stamping the moment with bureaucratic normalcy. But in a region where the security picture is getting more complex by the month, these reassurances are starting to land with less weight. Now, these joint air operations by China and Russia have grown more frequent since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, as Moscow and Beijing increase both their diplomatic and defense ties. For South Korea, the incursions are taking place against a backdrop of worsening regional security, and a North Korean regime now aligned more tightly than ever with both Beijing and Moscow. South Korea scrambled fighter jets in 2024 for a similar incursion, with comparable incidents occurring twice in both 2023 and 2022. And so the repetition is wearing thin on Seoul, where defense officials say they'll keep responding swiftly as long as Russian and Chinese aircraft and a tightening partnership with North Korea continue pushing up against edges of the defensive envelope. Okay, shifting focus to Israel, where what should have been a straightforward mission under President Trump's peace plan for Gaza may have been derailed by secret recordings. Israeli operatives were found monitoring U.S. and allied personnel inside an American-run coordination center. From the moment the report reached the U.S. commander of the base, Lieutenant General Patrick Frank, it was clear that this wasn't a one-off misunderstanding. It was an established monitoring program designed to intercept internal comms of those working inside the base. According to sources familiar with the situation, Frank learned that Israeli personnel had been capturing audio inside the Civil Military Coordination Center. Does that have an acronym? Of course it does. It's the CMCC, located in southern Israel. Frank's response was unusually blunt for a shared command environment, telling Israeli commanders the recording, quote, has to stop here. Reportedly, over a period of time since the CMCC has been up and running, American and allied officers have been warning each other to watch what they say inside the building, a sign that personnel suspected that the center wasn't as private as assumed. Well, also, it's just good operational security, or OPSEC, to be guarded and discreet when operating in a foreign country's facility, even when the country is a close ally. Once the monitoring effort was confirmed, sources say Jerusalem tried to wave off the concerns, saying everything was unclassified in the building and that the IDF was merely keeping, quote, protocols. But, well, that missed the point. American and allied officers weren't worried about classification, they were worried about trust. The shift in mood did spread fast. British and Emirati officers began comparing notes, warning colleagues that even routine updates might land in the wrong hands, in fear newly composed strategies could solely be shifted to benefit the Jewish state. I want to point out that this was all happening at a time when the CMCC has been struggling to prove it can deliver. The center was built to monitor the ceasefire, coordinate shipments, and outline Gaza's interim governance. But Israel's tight grip on the enclave meant that the U.S. and its allies were working inside boundaries that they didn't control. As one anonymous American official bluntly put it, Washington may be, quote, the glove, but Israel, quote, remains the hand. Now, with confidence inside the CMCC shaken by Israeli surveillance on its allies, the center finds itself drifting as Trump's peace plan hangs in the balance. Now, as a final thought here, to be fair, it should be assumed that allies spy on each other. It's the nature of the business. If anyone deployed to the CMCC, regardless of country of origin, was shocked to learn that the Israelis were monitoring their comms, well, they should find a new line of work. All right, coming up in the back of the brief, UAE-backed separatists tighten their grip in southern Yemen, deepening the political crisis in the country. I'll have those details when we come back. Hey, Mike Baker here, with a great holiday opportunity from our friends at Birch Gold Group. This holiday season, we're talking not just about gold, but silver. Right, silver and gold. That's what we're talking about here, because for every $5,000 you purchase between now and December 22nd, Birch Gold will send you an ounce of silver. And if you're not aware, silver is up over 60% this year. Here's the thing. When you're talking about protecting your hard-earned assets, it's important to diversify and to have a hedge against uncertain times and instability. That's why I encourage you to consider buying gold from the Birch Gold Group. Let Birch Gold help you convert an existing IRA or a 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. And for every $5,000 you buy, you'll get an ounce of silver for your Christmas stocking or for your kids' Christmas stocking. You know, it's a great way to teach them about investing and building a smart portfolio. Just text PDB to 989-898 to claim eligibility for this offer. Again, text PDB to the number 989-898 today, because Birch Gold's free silver with qualifying purchase promotion, well, that ends on December 22nd. Text PDB to 989-898. In today's back of the brief, the balance of power in Yemen's ongoing civil war is once again shifting. A separatist faction, backed by the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, has tightened its grip on southern Yemen, and their latest advance is raising real questions about whether the country could be split in two. Now, to understand what's happening, it does help to know the players involved. Yemen hasn't been a simple two-sided war for a long time. It's a conflict with overlapping factions, rival governments, foreign sponsors, and shifting alliances. At the top are the Houthis, the Iran-aligned movement that controls most of northern Yemen, including the capital, Sana'a. Opposing them is the internationally recognized Yemeni government, which has long relied on support from Saudi Arabia. That government is nominally in charge of the South, but much of its political authority has eroded after years of war, corruption, and military setbacks. Then there's the faction at the center of today's story, the Southern Transitional Council, or STC. They're backed by the UAE, and they've spent years building their own security forces, political structures, and territorial control. Their long-term goal isn't to govern all of Yemen, it's to reestablish an independent state, a South Yemen, similar to the one that existed before Yemen unified in 1990. Now here's a tidbit that you can roll out at cocktail parties. Before Yemen unified in 1990, South Yemen was the only communist state in the Arab world. Go ahead. You can use it at the next party. Impress your friends. You might want to mention the PDB. According to new reporting, the SDC has now taken full control of major areas in southern Yemen, including an oil-rich region that gives them both strategic and economic weight. Their fighters moved into new territory, seized government facilities, and raised the flag of the old South Yemen Republic over administrative buildings and border crossings. For a brief period, flights into and out of Aden, the government's temporary capital, were halted amid the chaos. This marks a significant shift in the country's internal balance of power. The STC already administered much of the South, but with these new gains, they now effectively govern nearly the entire area that once made up South Yemen. And that's where this concern comes in. Yemen was already fractured, but this move by the STC brings the possibility of a formal split much closer. The Houthis still dominate the north. The Yemeni government is hanging on in name only, and now the southern separatists control a contiguous stretch of territory with defined borders, their own security forces, and a growing political mandate. If this trend continues, Yemen could be heading toward a de facto partition, one that might not end the war, but rather reshape it into something even more complicated. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Wednesday, the 10th of December. Now, if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And if you'd like an ad-free PDB experience, well, we can make that happen. Just become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by simply visiting pdbpremium.com. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool. Hey, Mike Baker here with a tip on how to feed your family right this holiday season. It is the holiday season. Look, this time of year, everything gets busier. You know that. Schedules and travel and shipping and the grocery stores. So if you want to take one shopping burden off your plate, check in with the great folks over at Tri-Tails Beef. You've heard me talk about them before. Tri-Tails is a fifth-generation Texas ranching family. They're delivering the most delicious beef straight from their property to your doorstep. Now, the Tri-Tails I'll Be Home for Christmas box, you may say, what's that all about? Well, I'll tell you what it's all about. It's all about steaks. It's got the cuts you actually want when your house starts to fill up. Ribeyes and strips and fillets. Premium Angus, raised on a Texas ranch that still does things the right way. And right now, it's 15% off. But hurry, the deadline to ship before Christmas is December 14th. So if you want the holidays to be less stressful and more delicious, it's simple. Turn to Tri-Tails Beef. And if you're thinking about gifts, yeah, same thing. Turn to Tri-Tails Beef. Great gifts, and they're practical and sure to be enjoyed. Go to tritailsbeef.com. Again, that's tritailsbeef.com.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.